I know it's been a little while since you've seen me with the R31 project that we've been working on for the last couple of months, but the truth is that we haven't been able to race the thing. We've been able to do plenty of work, but in Sydney, the whole time, raining. We've either been COVIDed out or rained out for pretty much the last 12 months. So I'm still keen on the R31. I absolutely love it. So I've planned a little bit more work on it, a few more mechanical changes. It's got a new set of tyres on it after the drag racing adventure. We still haven't got to the track to do any of our burnouts, but we've got some suspension, we've got some brakes. We've got a bit of work to do on it before we get there anyway. So let the rain continue. Now, last time you would have seen the R31 in action is when Mitch was throttling it down the quarter mile at Sydney Dragway. He pedalled the thing to an 11.000, so close to that elusive 10-second pass, but he had plenty of excuses. And you know what? I kind of agree with him. He had a terrible set of tyres on the thing. We couldn't get the 235, 60, 15 drag radials that we do have on it now. Simply, there were none in the country. We've had some few shipping dramas, so we couldn't get those tyres. We have since tracked a set down and put them on the car. The tyres that we had on the car obviously didn't fit that well if you saw the video. That smoke coming out of the car, don't worry, it wasn't our stock engine. It was actually the tyre rubbing on the guard. So now that we've got some tyres that fit, we're also going to do a little bit more work there in the suspension. So we'll talk about that in a second. More importantly, we have also gone through and done a fuel level calibration video using this car. So I'll put the link to that in the comments below. Have a bit of a look. That's showing us exactly how to calibrate the IC7 dash fuel level input when you've got the sender wired directly to the dash. If we get really carried away, we might even run this car with low fuel at the track just to pick up that elusive 1/10 of a second so that we can say that we've run a 10-second pass. Hey, 1090 or a 10.1, you know, we can still claim that it's a 10-second car. So to get that 10-second pass, we've got a little bit of work to do today. The first thing that I'm going to do is fit a GPS speed sensor into the car. The reason I'm going to do that, the speed sensor in the factory gearbox simply doesn't work. I haven't been able to source another one. So if I can fit a GPS sensor directly into it, that's going to give us some road speed. That's going to give us a little bit of data and help us know what's happening as we're traveling down the track. The second task for this episode is fitting some suspension. So I've managed to buy some direct bolt-in replacement coilovers for this car. We've got some adjustable ride height in those coilovers. We've also got the spring rate set up. The guys have set the spring rates up for us. We've asked for something that's fairly street, but will also do a bit of drag racing. That's going to help heaps in this car when we get the thing to take off. That funny sort of squat on the factory suspension it's had when we run our 11-second pass. Hopefully that'll be a thing of the past and we'll put a heap more traction down. And I'm very, very confident that the first couple of passes with this new coilover set in it will be spot on. And I'm pretty confident that's where we're going to get a couple of tenths from straight away. But it can't all be about performance. We are going to take this car to a few shows and we're going to take it to a couple of events, do a couple of demos at some of probably the bigger events in Sydney. So it needs to look a little bit cooler. And on the steel wheels on the back, personally, that's my style, is the steel wheel with the drag radial and factory wheels up front, but I know that's not for everybody. So we'll put a nice set of wheels on it and we'll set that ride height so the thing does actually look pretty cool. Right, well, it's time to start doing it and stop talking about it. So I'm going to pull the thing out of the studio, I'll take it back over to the workshop, I'll put it on the hoist where it's easy to work on, and we'll get into this GPS speed sensor. You might remember that when we did the engine in this, we also put a built Jatco transmission in. Everything's going fantastic except for the speed sensor in the gearbox is no longer working. Because this thing's modified, it's all too painful to get a new speed sensor in the gearbox. So instead of doing that today, I'm just going to be fitting one of the Haltech GPS speed input modules. Really straightforward. It's got 12 volt supply, it's got a signal ground, and it's got a signal that comes out. I'm going to wire that into one of the digital inputs on the Haltech Elite ECU.
It's then going to go into the ECU for data logging, for a bit nicer idle control, for any speed limiting in case we want to stop people from speeding in this thing. It's also going to send the speed through the CAN network to the dash so we can see the speed on the dash as well. Now, if you need a full step-by-step of how to wire the GPS sensor into your ECU or into your dash, we've already done a full step-by-step video. I'll put a link in the description so you can link to that. But for what we're doing right now, I've already skipped a few steps. And what I mean by that is that I've already gone in here, I've already pinned a digital input into pin B7 on the ECU. That's my blue wire. I've also added a 12-volt supply wire and a signal ground wire. I've terminated them into my Deutsch DTM female pins, and we'll get a close-up of these because I do like talking about crimping pins, and these ones, I actually did them pretty well. If we look at them really closely, what you can see is that I've got the 3 pins. They're crimped nicely using the 20 gauge Deutsch crimpers that we do, and then there's a bit of raw copper, or there's a bit of unsheathed wire just there for a bit of strain relief. You don't want to put the sheathing all the way up to the back of the pin and then crimp it. If you do that, it does tend to put a bit more strain on the wire there. So if you just leave, not a lot, 3 millimeters, something like that of copper, then the insulation, all we'll do then is put it into our Deutsch DTM3 pin and she's away. So I've got the instruction sheet that comes with the GPS puck, and it tells me that pin 1 of the Deutsch connector, red, power. So I'm just going to look at the Deutsch connector. Not a lot of people notice that it actually has pin 1 and pin 3 written on the side of the connector. So you don't need to be looking in here trying to figure out what's going on. All we need to do, find pin 1. There it is, it's stamped there. Pin 1, power. Jam that in there. Snap. I hope you can hear that tiny little click when it goes in. The next one, signal output. I know that's my blue wire, that's connected to my digital input on the ECU. I'll be quiet for a second. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Last wire, and I always check the last wire that I'm putting in. It's obvious that I've only got 1 wire left, I've only got 1 hole, so it should be right. But I always check it because if it's not right, that means I've stuffed something up as well. So, black wire, that is my ground. That is going to pin 3, and pin 3 is labeled there. In, I'll hear it snap. There it goes, give it a little yank. None of them can come out. They're all seated nicely in the top here. Then I just put my cheese in, snap, and we're done. Little yank, that's it, as simple as that. In the NSP software, it's pretty straightforward to configure as well. I know that I put the speed signal wire into pin B7. So in the software, that's SPI4. What I'm going to do, or synchronized pulsed input for. So if I come up to vehicle speed, I'll enable a drivetrain sensor. Drivetrain sensor, pulses per kilometer, 5,000. I know that because the instructions tell me that's what it's got. Calibration speed, it also tells me the cal speed is 60 kilometers an hour, so I type that in. I'll come down to wiring. I'll go select. It's letting me choose SPI4, and it also tells me that that is pin B7, so I know I've wired it correctly. I'll click on that. I've got edge select. This is all in the software, in the instructions as well. It tells me falling, sensor type, Hall effect or digital, pull up, disable, bang, apply, reset ECU. Now, if my setup's right, my wiring's right, already I can see that I've got a little green light on the GPS puck here, which is pretty cool. So what that's telling me is that we're indoors in the workshop here. It's got a half tin and it's got a half sort of poly roof. Just throwing the puck in the windscreen, it's already picked up reception. The solid green light telling us we've got 2 or more GPS in our sights and the car's not moving. If we were moving, the light will start flashing to indicate that it's outputting pulses. To test this thing without having to start the car and muck around, I'm just going to gently squeeze the middle of the puck. The light just went off. In my software, it shows me that I am getting a frequency there. I'm showing 60 kilometers an hour. That's getting sent via the CAN network to my dash. And if I go to a channel on my dash that's got a speedo, it is also going to tell me 60 kilometers an hour. We're in calibration mode. Everything's working. First go. That's pretty lucky. So it's always important to test everything before you do any hard installations. Now I know everything's working. I'm gonna get 6'10" of me crawling upside down under the dash, and I'm gonna make it my day's mission to put that wire down through the dash neatly so that it doesn't roll down the side. So wish me luck.
Straight into the unboxing, the first thing we've got here is the coilover set that we've got for the Australian R31 Skyline. So the guys at Angry Industries have built these for us. It's a coilover on the top, so it's adjustable in the ride height by adjusting this bit. It's adjustable in the droop of the shock by adjusting this bottom bit. What's special about these is the guys at Angry Industries actually weld on a factory R31 Skyline stub axle down the bottom here. It's got 9mm brake centers. So what that means is in this particular car, I can take the factory strut out. This is a direct replacement straight in. Then our brake disc with our wheel bearings straight over the top, put the nut on the front there, put the brake caliper back on. Should be a pretty straightforward thing. The most complicated thing about this whole setup is making sure that we set the ride height correctly by adjusting this so that it looks nice, but we also get to drive it on the street without it smashing the guards in, as well as setting the thread here into the bottom of the shock. And what's happening there, we're setting it up so that the wheel uses the middle of the shock absorber so that we don't bottom the shock absorber out at the top, and so that it's got enough droop so that the shock actually works when we're using the car. That's probably one of the biggest dramas that I see with coilover suspension when it's not set up to get the droop correct. So what we want to happen is we want to have sort of about 60% give or take that we can compress, and about 40% that we want it to be able to come up when we're driving the car. As for the struts in the rear, a little bit different to the front, where these ones bolt up into the factory position, nice and easy. We've still got our ride height adjustment here. We've still got our droop adjustment down the bottom here, so we will pay particular attention to that when we're putting them in. Bolts in straight down the bottom, so this one doesn't have the brake disc or the caliper attached to it because it's in the rear of the car, and the suspension setup is just a little bit different to the front. The dampering, all of them have got adjustable dampening on the top so we can set up as hard or soft. And the legend at Angry Industries has helped us out by choosing the right coil spring setup so that we've got something that's soft enough to drive on the street, but we'll also be able to do a bit of drag racing on these, maybe even a bit of drifting if we get carried away. Here's a nice shot of the old for new. So this is the old front strut with the shock that goes in the tube here with the spring on top. We've got the brake disc. Behind this top thing, there's a nut, and then inside there's the wheel bearing. The wheel bearing sits on this position here. That's the thread for that nut that I'm talking about on the front. So we've got a little bit of work to do there, where what I want to do is take this disc and this wheel bearing off. I'll repack that wheel bearing, then put this disc over the top of this. For the front, that's pretty much it. If we look at the actual length of all of the struts here, you'll notice that the factory strut here is physically at the moment a lot longer, but that's because when it goes in the car and the weight goes in it, everything squishes down and it ends up something magically like the length of this one. And the reason I know this one is right is because off camera, Luke and I have already spent a heap of time setting it up to get the right droop, meaning that the shock is in the middle of its travel, so that when we jack the thing up, when it hits a bump, when it compresses or when it rebounds, it doesn't bottom the shock out. And that's one of the biggest dramas that we see, like I said. Over here, we've got the factory rear strut. So there's a factory replacement one from Munro. I can't press down on it anyway, but you get the idea. That same thing. It's got the strut in the middle. It's got the spring around the outside. There's a bolt that goes through this to bolt it to the rear suspension. And then this bolts up in the rear parcel shelf. We'll get rid of the old one, in the new one. Everything's a little bit lighter as well. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. But same sort of thing here. So we're adjusting the ride height through this one. We're adjusting the droop through this one down here. But we'll bolt this all in. Hopefully it comes up at about the right ride height. If we do need to change the ride height between wheels, whether we put our fancy wheels on it or whether we put our drag radials on it, we'll be adjusting this to adjust our ride height. There's no elegant way to do it with your hands, but I'm going to do my best. And all you do is hold it like this. It's starting to push the old brown bit, it's pushing that bit out. So that's it, the strut's bolted back in. I'll tighten everything up in the top in a second, but I've also got to put the brake caliper back on. When I took it off, I just took the whole thing off with the pads inside it. So in case you're not sure what this thing is the brake caliper. When you put your foot on the brake pedal in the car, hydraulic line pressure goes through the master cylinder, down through this hose. It pushes here on the piston pushes across, and it's got these brake pads inside that squeeze onto the brake rotor, and that's how you slow down. But in this case, I'm not sure of what these pads are. I've got an upgraded set anyway. We're going to leave the factory brake caliper, this main part at the moment, and we're going to replace the pads. But to get the caliper back on, it's going to make it a little bit easier if I replace the pads right now as well. So while the caliper's off, easy. That's one of the brake pads. That's what they look like. We're down here with Julian from Prestige Tyre and Auto in Marrickville. He's got the tyres, we've got the wheels, and he's going to show us why we're going to put this size tyre on the wheel. He's going to put them on and he's going to show us how to do it, and he might even let me try one. So before we hide this thing away under a tyre, we better have a good look at it. So this is a BBS original wheel on the front here, but it's been fully restored by Barra Brothers, which means that they've actually remanufactured the whole barrel. This whole part, the bit around the edge here, 4 stud to fit our Nissan R31. Then when they remanufacture the wheel, one of the real benefits of it is you can choose the width of the wheel. So this one's for the rear, it's 9 inches wide, and you can choose the offset. So this is plus 19. But a real work of art, and something that, you know, this style of wheel, mate, they're pretty cool. I don't really know what year they came out, but that's a pretty nice retro looking wheel that you don't really see that often in any of the brand new wheels that have been manufactured. So Barra Brothers are doing a really nice thing, bringing these back to life. It's not going to leak, it's not going to be buckled, it's going to balance up perfectly, and it's got the exact retro look for our 35-year-old R31 Skyline. So first of all, mate, what have we got? What size wheels? What's going on here?
So we've got some 15 by 9 BBS, and we're going to be fitting them up with the latest Zestino in the Victus ZS01, 245, 45, 15.
So it's a 9-inch rim. Why have we decided to put a 245 tyre on it? Could we put something like bigger or something smaller on that rim?
We could put smaller and bigger,
Yeah.
depending on the application. For the R31, we've decided to go with the 245. It's going to be a good fit for the wheel and a good fit for the body of the car. You could do up to a 265 wide tyre on this wheel,
Right.
but for this application, it's going to be much better with the 245, and it won't be too stretched.
Yeah, so 265 will be the biggest. Just out of interest, on a 9-inch wheel like this, what's the smallest sort of tyre that we could go and stretch it to get that look?
Look, smallest tyre we've probably done is something around a 215.
Right.
Probably something more for the drift boys, a bit of a stance look, that kind of market. But you can do like 215, 205, just depending on the application, just more and more stretch that gets really.
So we're probably not that keen on the stance look, but you never know, we might come back and put it to 1.5 or something on just to see what it looks like. But for today, this tyre, we kind of want the car to be a little bit of an all-rounder, so bit of street, tiny bit of circuit stuff. It's an auto transmission with a store converter, so there's not going to be that much circuit racing at all. But drag racing, we will do a little bit. We do have another set of wheels. We've got a set of drag radials for it. But for these, if we get caught out, we can use these at the drag strip.
Yeah, absolutely. The ZSO1's a bit of a, like this one here in particular is a medium compound tyre. So it will be good for a little bit of everything. It will cater to the guys that are going to go circuit racing. You will be able to get some heat into these and take them to the drag strip, and they will grip up and go. They'll be great. And you could drive to and from the track on them as well. They are DOT, so they're street legal as well.
Awesome. This is going to be our next question. So no dramas, and there's markings on the side of the tyre. So if anything happens, we can look at that and say, oh, mate, they're street legal.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Righto, mate. So we've mounted the brand new tyres on the brand new wheels, and then I kind of thought that was it. I forgot about the balancing part altogether. So can you quickly run us through what the wheel balancer does and why do we need to balance a brand new wheel and a brand new tyre together?
Yeah, so basically every wheel and tyre will have a different high or low spot as well. So the wheel balancing process just eliminates those high and low spots to make sure that we get a nice, even 0-0 wheel balance. So that way when you put them on the car, if you're doing high speed or any freeway driving, that you don't get that vibration.
So this is just that shudder through the steering wheel, that's what we're going to stop?
Correct, yeah. So we're balancing the wheel and tyre together and we're stopping that vibration that you can feel if you're on the road. Similar, if you don't have the wheel as hub-centric, you'll get a similar. You can balance the wheel, but if the wheel isn't hub-centric, then you will get that vibration as well. So the mix between the wheel balancing and making the wheels hub-centric to the hub of the vehicle will get you a perfect ride.
Killing it. And if we are a little bit out, which you would expect to be, right? Because every tyre is going to be moulded a little bit differently. What do we do? Do we still hammer weights onto it, or how does that work to balance them out?
So basically, if there's ever an issue with the tyre in particular, then it may not be able to be balanced. It will continually ask you to add weight and things like that. But with these, we will be able to get them to 0-0 because it is, a wheel which has been refurbished with brand new barrels, and you've got a brand new good quality tyre. That will be the perfect match, and we'll get them down to 0-0 and not too much weight on them either.
So that's probably an interesting point. You said, so if we do get some pretty low-end tyres, you'll find that you'll just keep waiting, and then you'll always end up with a bit of a steering wheel wobble or just something funny. And you could probably blame the wheel or something in the car, but realistically, it's just the cheap-ass tyre that you put on it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, it does come down to the quality of the tyre. It also comes down to if you're using second-hand or used wheels, that can be an issue too. Things like wheel buckles as well can be a problem. Used tyres that have high or low spots in them, tyres that have a steel belt separation inside as well, that's something that will never be able to be balanced.
So this thing is, while it's balancing it, it's probably also giving us like a bit of an indication of whether this is safe or not if we're using something that is an old wheel or an old tyre.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can see by either how much weight the wheel and tyre wants, or visually when we spin it up on the balancer, and we can check for high and low spots and for buckles as well, or any other types of damage, whether it be to the tyre or the wheel.
Yeah, right.
And then that determines whether it's safe to fit or not, and whether it's going to work together.
Sweet. All right, well, let's balance these up. With any luck, we don't have too many dramas, and then we'll go and put them on the car. I'm keen as, I think they look awesome.
Yeah, they do.
I saw it when you spun it by hand before, and like, just the front of the wheel looks awesome. Like real nice. That has been a hell of a day, but I'm pretty excited. We got a lot of stuff done, and we finally got the R31 looking cool. Well, what some people think is cool. It's kind of stance, kind of Japo, kind of like old school. Might have be better suited off on a Corolla or a Datsun or something like that, but it definitely has the style now. Well, that's it. She's driving beautifully. She's looking good. So it's time for us to hit the tracks. But first, we need this rain to clear up. We'll attend some shows. As soon as everything opens back up again, we're away. And I'm looking forward to it in our awesome R31.